Can you imagine living in a place where there's a 1 in 9 chance you'll be a victim of violent crime, where it's not a matter of if, but when, something terrifying might happen to you? No, this isn't some post-apocalyptic Netflix series. It's real life in modern-day America. And we're not even talking about big-name cities like Chicago or Detroit. These aren't metropolises with millions of people and sprawling gang territories. No, we're talking about places you've probably never heard of. Small towns. Quiet towns. These are towns with populations under 50,000. And yet, they harbor violent crime rates that would make your jaw drop. At least, that's how they seem. Until you look closer. Some of them see more murders, assaults, and armed robberies per capita than major urban war zones. Today, we'll take you on a chilling journey across America, exposing the 15 most dangerous small towns in the country. From frozen Alaskan fishing villages, riddled with abuse, to southern towns torn apart by poverty, drugs, deindustrialization, a culture of fear, maybe all of the above, and poverty, to communities where murder is a common headline, and even social media influencers aren't safe walking the streets. What makes these places so violent? But one thing is certain, you'll never look at a quiet little town the same way again. If you're fascinated by the hidden dark sides of seemingly peaceful places, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because what we uncover next might shock you. Our journey begins in a place with a name that sounds like it belongs in a war movie. Battle Creek, Michigan. Ironically, this town of just over 50,000 people is better known as the home of Kellogg's cereal. It's literally called Cereal City. But behind the cornflakes and sugar-coated branding lies something far less sweet. Battle Creek has a violent crime rate more than double the Michigan state average, 12.08 per 1,000 people, compared to 4.95. And sadly, it's only the first stop on our list. What's next is even worse. According to FBI statistics, residents here have a 1 in 83 chance of becoming a victim of a violent crime. Let that sink in. Walking down the street or heading to school in Battle Creek might be more dangerous than some war zones. In 1 year, the town recorded 7 murders, 57 sexual assaults, 38 robberies, and over 530 aggravated assaults. You wouldn't expect that the same place that gave the world cornflakes would also make national headlines for gun violence. But that's exactly what makes small-town crime so unsettling. These aren't places we expect this from. And that false sense of security is what makes them dangerous. And this isn't just about numbers. The stories are chilling. In a recent tragedy, a 14-year-old was charged with shooting and killing a fellow student from Battle Creek Central High School. A child murdering another child. This town, famous for breakfast, is also infamous for bloodshed. Battle Creek just barely fits into our small town category, but its crime rates rival places 10 times its size. Next, we travel south to Parag. According to the most recent FBI statistics, residents here face a 1 in 83 chance of becoming the victim of a violent crime. The same odds as in Battle Creek, but the danger in Parag is much less expected. Officially, there were no murders during the reporting period, which might sound reassuring. However, there were still 26 cases of sexual misconduct, 8 robberies, and a shocking 328 aggravated assaults. That's a serious amount of violence for such a small population. And it's not just numbers. Recent reports show a worrying trend. In just one 24-hour period, Parag police responded to 2 shootings and a stabbing. Locals were so alarmed that many began calling the department asking, "Should we be concerned?" The police answer was vague. But the reality is clear. Yes, you should. In towns like this, it's easy to pretend that violence is something that happens somewhere else. But Parag proves that even when the murder rate appears low, the violence hasn't gone away. It's just taken a different form. A form that leaves communities on edge, uncertain about what tomorrow might bring. And if you think that's bad, the next place we going will leave you speechless. Where a 1 in 10 chance of falling victim to violence isn't an exaggeration. It's everyday life. Let's now head to the icy frontier of America, Dillingham, Alaska. Nestled along Bristol Bay with a population of just over 2,300 people. It looks like the kind of place you'd go to escape the chaos of modern life. If you're in the western section, it's 1 in 10. Yes, 1 in 10. Those are Vegas odds. But instead of a jackpot, you could be dealing with robbery, assault, or worse. That's not just dangerous, that's dystopian. Isolated, scenic, and tranquil. Or so you'd think. In reality, Dillingham is one of the most dangerous small towns in the entire country. It's proof that remoteness doesn't mean safety. Here's the terrifying math. If you live in the northern part of this tiny town, you have a 1 in 28 chance of becoming a victim of violent crime. In 2007, Dillingham had the highest rate of sexual misconduct per capita in the United States, with 1 incident for every 103.9 residents. The latest reports still suggest that the problem is deeply rooted. Just recently, a 59-year-old man was sentenced to 13 years in prison for a sex crime, only one of many such stories emerging from this isolated region. The poverty rate here doesn't help. The per capita income in Dillingham is just over $21,000, nearly a third of the national average. About 12% of the population lives below the poverty line, with limited access to resources, law enforcement, and mental health support. Problems escalate fast, and there's nowhere to run when things go wrong. And yet, as grim as that is, there are towns where the violence is even more common, and even harder to escape. Let's head down south again for our next stop, Spartanberg. The name itself sounds gritty, almost ancient, and in some ways, this South Carolina town of 38,000 feels like a battleground. Spartanberg was once known for its booming textile mills, but after decades of deindustrialization, it's now better known for crime. Your odds of being a victim, 1 in 66. For perspective, that's worse than in many of America's largest cities. The FBI data is sobering. 8 murders, 77 robberies, 27 cases of sexual misconduct, and 473 aggravated assaults. That's not the occasional bar fight or random theft. This is systemic. The statistics paint a bleak picture. 585 violent crimes and 2,356 property crimes in 1 year alone. That breaks down to over 15 violent crimes for every 1,000 people. Police point fingers at the opioid epidemic. Prescription pills turning into heroin, then fentanyl. Stolen firearms flooding the streets. In 2022 alone, 130 firearms were reported stolen, 78 of them taken from unlocked cars. Crime stats are reportedly lower than they were a decade ago. But when over 600 people are victims of violent crimes in a single year, in a town this size, better is still a long way from safe. The police chief has gone on record to say, the opioid problem is significant here, and the data backs it up. And as we move on, that road leads us deeper into towns where hope seems even more fragile, and where violence is just a part of daily life. Yet, this is also a town that's allegedly improving. Spartanberg may be slowly climbing out of the hole, but it still has a long road ahead. And as we move on, That road leads us deeper into towns where hope seems even more fragile, and where violence is just a part of daily life. Our next stop is Henderson, North Carolina, a town of just 15,000 people packed into 8 square miles. On paper, it might seem like a quiet, old Southern community. That includes 5 murders, 8 reports of sexual misconduct, 39 robberies, and an astonishing 190 for aggravated assaults. For a town this small, those numbers are chilling. Statistically, residents here face a 1 in 61 chance of being a victim of violent crime, the same as much larger and more infamous urban centers. But beneath the surface, Henderson harbors serious problems: poverty, lack of opportunity, and most of all, crime. The median income in Henderson is around $23,000, and roughly 25% of its residents live below the poverty line. For children, that number is even worse. But in Henderson, the scars run deep, and the headlines don't lie. Like many towns on this list, Henderson is trapped in a vicious cycle. Economic hardship fuels desperation, which in turn fuels violence. According to the most recent FBI data, there were 246 violent crimes and 639 property crimes in just 1 year. But it's not just about the violence. It's the poverty that shapes the story. In March 2023, 3 people, including a woman, were charged with murder in the deaths of 2 men found shot in a car. These aren't isolated events. They're part of a pattern, one that has taken root over years, if not generations. When you hear the word hometown, you don't expect it to come with a body count. Now let us move on to a place that defies logic with how dangerous it is, even for its size. Just outside of Chicago lies Sauk Village, Illinois, a town so small it barely stretches across 4 square miles, yet so violent it rivals the worst urban war zones. With a population of just under 10,000, you might expect a tight-knit community with a peaceful, suburban feel. Instead, you get a crime rate that feels more like a live grenade waiting to go off. In a single year, Sauk Village recorded 529 violent crimes. Yes, you heard that right. That's more than 1 violent crime for every 20 people in town. It's a staggering number. The breakdown includes 2 murders and an unbelievable 490 aggravated assaults. While property crime in the town is present, with 170 incidents reported, it's clear that this is a place where people are more likely to hurt each other than steal from each other. That makes the odds terrifying. A 1 in 18 chance of being the victim of violent crime. And when you factor in both property and violent crime together, your odds worsen to 1 in 14. Some of the worst in the country. For context, in the rest of Illinois, the average person has a 1 in 253 chance of encountering violent crime. That makes Sauk Village 14 times more dangerous than the state average. The poverty rate here tells part of the story. Over 27% of residents live below the poverty line. Even more disturbing, 52% of people under 18 live in poverty, with desperation running deep and resources stretched thin. It's not hard to see how tensions explode into violence. Recent headlines included a young man shot dead in his own front yard. It's heartbreaking. And more than anything, it's routine here. Let's head west next, to a place ravaged not just by crime, but by drugs. In the desert valleys of northern New Mexico sits a town with a haunting reputation, Espanola. Known historically for its proximity to the Los Alamos National Laboratory, where the atomic bomb was developed, Espanola is now infamous for something far more personal and devastating: drugs and violence. That translates to a 1 in 30 chance of being the victim of a violent crime. One journalist from the Los Angeles Times recently described the downtown area like this. Kids played in trailer parks. A resident put it bluntly, "I've had knives pointed at me, pipes swung at me. It's scary. Half the kids I went to school with didn't have parents. They were dead, in jail, or gone." The cycle of addiction, poverty, and violence feels unbreakable here, and fentanyl is only making things worse. Contractors loaded pickups. Cars came and went from a methadone clinic. Men in hoodies drifted toward houses with barred windows. It sounds like a scene out of a dystopian novel, but it's real life in Espanola. But in some neighborhoods, that number skyrockets. In the eastern part of town, it's 1 in 13. That's nearly double the risk faced by the average American soldier deployed overseas. But disturbingly, the next place on our list shows that even in more developed areas, the spiral into violence continues. With just over 10,000 residents, Espanola recorded 353 violent crimes and 383 property crimes in a single year. This isn't just about numbers. This is about community decay. The root of the crisis? Generational trauma, generational drug use. Espanola represents what happens when an entire town slips through the cracks. But disturbingly, the next place on our list shows that even in more developed areas, the spiral into violence continues. Tucked in the hills of eastern Alabama lies Anniston, a town of just over 21,000 people, known for its past in heavy industry and military installations. But these days, Anniston is fighting a very different kind of battle, one against violent crime, drugs, and economic despair. According to the latest FBI data, there were 162 violent crimes and a staggering 1,090 for property crimes in just 1 year. That gives residents a 1 in 131 chance of falling victim to a violent crime, lower than some on this list, but a much worse 1 in 19 chance of suffering a break-in, theft, or worse. The breakdown includes 7 murders, 7 sexual assaults, 30 robberies, and 118 aggravated assaults. That's more bloodshed and trauma than many larger cities experience, all crammed into a relatively small town. Recent headlines are as dark as you'd expect. One story tells of a man found dead in a ditch, suspected murder. Another, 3 people arrested in a kidnapping and attempted murder case. Like many other small towns hit hard by the end of American manufacturing, the people of Anniston are often left with little support and a lot of pain. For a town this small, these stories are becoming disturbingly routine. This is no longer just about crime. It's about a town on the brink with no easy answers. Anniston's decline is reflected in its economy. The median household income is painfully low, and opportunities are scarce. The combination of opioids, economic hardship, and stolen firearms adds fuel to the fire. But believe it or not, our next town, isolated and frozen, is somehow even worse. Now we travel far north, to Katsubu, Alaska, just 30 miles above the Arctic Circle. This remote village of about 3,000 people exists in one of the harshest environments on Earth. Statistically, residents here have a 1 in 30 chance of being the victim of a violent crime. For a population this small, the concentration of trauma is staggering. And while most people imagine Alaska as a vast, wild frontier where rugged individuals live off the land, Katsubu reflects a darker reality, where isolation doesn't protect people, it traps them. Mental health resources are minimal. Law enforcement is stretched thin. The cycle of abuse, substance addiction, and violence continues largely unchecked. That's the same risk as living in neighborhoods of major crime-ridden cities. Except this isn't New York, or Detroit, or Los Angeles. This is a remote Alaskan village that can barely be accessed by road. But the cold, unforgiving climate isn't the only danger residents face. In Katsubu, violence has carved itself deep into the frozen ground. Frisco, Texas, also saw no homicides despite housing over 160,000 people. And yet Katsubu, a village small enough to fit in a football stadium, had multiple murders and violent crime in triple digits, with 111 violent crimes in a single year, including two murders. This tiny town has one of the highest crime rates per capita in the country. Recent news paints a grim picture. Assaults, kidnappings, violent crimes against children. For context, let's compare it to elsewhere. Fremont, California, with a population of over 235, had 0 murders. This level of danger in such an isolated place is shocking. But what comes next will challenge your understanding of how bad things can really get in the heart of America. Welcome to East St. Louis, a town with just over 18,000 people. But the kind of violent crime statistics you'd expect from a city 10 times its size. Located just across the Mississippi River from the more well-known St. Louis, Missouri, this small Illinois city has earned a brutal reputation. 36. That's more than most entire counties report in a year. And this place is just 8 square miles in size. For comparison, most small towns in Illinois report 0 to 5 murders per year at most. But East St. Louis? It was a bloodbath. And to make matters worse, only 25% of those murder cases were ever prosecuted. The national average for prosecution is 60%. Here, killers walk free, and the numbers don't lie. The last time the FBI released its data, East St. Louis had 36 murders. The rest of the violent crime stats are just as alarming. 27 cases of sexual misconduct, 32 robberies, and 173 aggravated assaults. Strangely, the rate of assault isn't as high as some others on this list. But the murder rate more than makes up for it. You have a 1 in 95 chance of being the victim of violent crime in East St. Louis. But if you're a young man, especially under 30, that risk skyrockets. This is also one of the poorest places in America. One headline read, 2 men slain in East St. Louis home. Another, 11-year-old boy shot after argument between 2 women over clothes. Yes, over clothes. It's not East St. Louis, as the mayor once tried to brand it. It's East Survive Louis. And yet, unbelievably, it still doesn't take the top spot. West Memphis, Arkansas, population 26,000, sits right across the Mississippi River from Memphis, Tennessee. But while its neighbor is known for blues and barbecue, West Memphis is known for something far darker, being one of the most violent small towns in the country. The FBI's latest crime data shows 648 violent crimes in just 1 year in a town that barely registers on the national radar. Add to that another 953 property crimes, and you've got a place where the odds of being involved in a crime aren't just bad. They're terrifying. And while law enforcement tries to stay on top of it, the flood of guns, drugs, and generational poverty is overwhelming. This is a town that has long struggled to escape the shadows of its past. But the darkness has only grown thicker. You have a 1 in 37 chance of being the victim of a violent crime here. Statistically, your odds of dying in a car crash here are just as high as being shot. Drive or walk. It's all risky in West Memphis. And honestly, with headlines like the ones we've seen, that sounds optimistic. One recent story reported a man found dead in a burning car, shot and then torched. Police suspect Another, a 15-year-old boy gunned down outside an apartment complex. And another still, a brutal carjacking survivor later found dead, possibly targeted again. West Memphis isn't just dangerous, it's volatile. What's truly unsettling is how normalized it's become. Residents speak of shootings like others talk about weather. What makes it even worse? West Memphis also ranks high for vehicle accidents. But as jaw-dropping as this sounds, the violence continues to escalate as we move to the next town, one where the murder rate makes even cartel hotspots blush. Pine Bluff, Arkansas, with a population of about 41,000. You might assume it's just another southern town trying to hold on through hard times. Property crime is just as rampant here, with 2,348 reported incidents. Your chance of being the victim of theft or burglary is a chilling 1 in 17. Combined, that means people here live in constant fear, inside their homes or out in the streets. Now consider this. In the United States, the average murder rate is about 6.2 per 100,000 people. What's coming next is perhaps the most shocking of all. But statistically speaking, Pine Bluff is more dangerous than many war zones. In the 1960s, civil rights protesters were shot in the streets. Schools are struggling. Families are fractured. It's no wonder that pain and rage erupt so often. Today, the violence continues in another form. A recent headline read, "To juveniles held without bond for capital murder." Just below it, 4 people under 18 shot and killed since March. Another story, to dead, to injured in Pine Bluff shooting, 21-year-old suspect in custody. In just 1 year, this small city reported 23 murders, 36 sexual assaults, 56 robberies, and a staggering 710 aggravated assaults. That is a total of 825 violent crimes. Enough to give residents a 1 in 49 chance of becoming a victim. But that's not even the whole story. The town has a violent history stretching back decades. In 1866, it was the site of a mass lynching of 24 African Americans. Nearly half of the kids here live in poverty. What's coming next is perhaps the most shocking of all. But Pine Bluff doesn't even crack the top 3. Florida City. It sounds like a postcard destination, doesn't it? Beaches, palm trees, warm weather. But just 35 miles south of Miami, this small town of about 13,000 people is anything but paradise. In fact, Florida City has earned a notorious reputation as one of the most violent places in America, despite its tiny size. In a single year, Florida City logged 337 violent crimes and 682 property crimes. That gives you a 1 in 38 chance of being a victim of violent crime, and a 1 in 19 chance of suffering a property crime. The per capita income? Just $8,170, far below the national average. 43% of residents live below the poverty line. For those under 18, it's even worse. Over 57% of kids here are growing up in poverty. Desperation hangs in the air, and the result is often chaos. In a town this small, those odds are brutal, but the crime rate alone doesn't tell the whole story. One particularly shocking incident involved a man who assaulted his 3 children so severely that one had to be airlifted to a hospital. His excuse to police? He was on Molly, a drug known for producing euphoric feelings. Not in Florida City. Florida City is also one of the poorest places in the nation. If you've ever wondered where the American dream can turn into a nightmare, Florida City is it. The crimes here range from armed robbery to home invasions to horrifying cases of domestic abuse. And yet, this town has appeared at the top of most violent lists more than once in recent years. Still, we have 2 towns left. and they make even this look survivable by comparison. We end our journey with not one, but two towns that top the list of America's most violent small communities: Monroe, Louisiana, and Bessemer, Alabama. First, Monroe. With just 47,000 residents, this town reported 19 murders, 9 sexual assaults, 111 robberies, and an astounding 1,105 aggravated assaults in a single year. That's 1,240 for violent crimes total, and a jaw-dropping 1 in 38 chance of being a victim. For property crime, it's 1 in 18. Monroe's poverty rate is staggering. 54% of residents under 18 live below the poverty line. That gives residents a 1 in 30 chance of being a victim of violence, and a 1 in 13 chance for property crime. Combined, a terrifying 1 in 9. That means if you live in Bessemer, it's not a question of whether crime will touch your life. It's when. Recent news stories read like horror scripts. A man charged with murdering 4 people in a house fire. A woman who stabbed her father after watching a Chucky movie. Local media even used the word plagued to describe the city's endless stream of shootings. Other headlines followed. A man murdered over a DoorDash order. A 20-year-old gunned down. His wallet was missing. And so many others that don't even make the national news. We explore the hidden stories, the hard truths, and the voices too often ignored. And yet, Bessemer, Alabama somehow beats even that. Bessemer is home to just 26,000 people. It saw 850 violent crimes and 2,030 property crimes in 1 year. The town's economic picture is grim. Median household income is just $23,000. Per capita income, $12,232. Nearly 38% of those under 18 live in poverty. Desperation bleeds into rage. Violence becomes currency. Perhaps the most haunting detail. In 2021, a 46-year-old TikToker with over 300,000 followers came to Bessemer to document poverty and was shot to death outside a motel. These towns, and many others like them, are tragic reminders that America's violence isn't always where you expect it. Sometimes, it's hiding in plain sight, just down the highway, in a place that looks harmless, until the sun goes down. If this deep dive opened your eyes to a side of America rarely shown, consider subscribing to our channel. And now, ask yourself, could this be your town?